All right. Welcome, everyone. It is the Torch second birthday Torch Talk. The whole week of celebrations that we're having as part of the second anniversary of this newsletter. If you're not a subscriber, if you become one, you will get some of these amazing stickers that you can put on your water bottles or anywhere else. My name is Alyssa Walker. I'm the editor of Torched. So happy to have Jessica Meaney here this month. With the drop of the budget, there's really no better person to come in and either make us really excited or make us really depressed about what the year ahead of us, this next budget cycle. But I think you'll be very excited and leave very optimistic because that's what Jessica's like. I'm gonna let her introduce herself, but you can also click on this little link over here, which has all the information that brought you here today. That has more information about investing in place and everything else she's doing. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thanks for having me and happy second birthday. That's pretty huge. That's impressive. You're doing such awesome work. I'm always looking forward to your newsletters and really the deep dives you're doing on what's going on with our mega event region and all of that. And I'm also so excited to see so many people I know who have come to join this discussion. And I think we're gonna have like Q&A and a discussion too at some point. So I hope everyone will stay on and contribute because I'm very curious what y'all are thinking. And I am hoping to deliver a message of hope and optimism because I think something that a lot of us have been working towards for a very long time, towards systemic reform on the management of our public spaces, is queued up and is talked about in mayoral conversations. It is queued up in charter reform. It's getting more play than I've ever seen the conversation beyond a single issue challenge in the city around infrastructure to a comprehensive look. And I think many of you on this call have been part of getting it this far too. So I'm just really excited to talk about this with everyone.
I'm so excited to hear it. So I'm gonna let you really just begin um, at the beginning because I feel like how we kind of met is we were just walking around for years. Like how long ago we have known each other? Like 16 years, did we decide?
Yep.
And just like, what's wrong with the sidewalks? Why are the sidewalks like this? And this was long before, we had a lawsuit that forced the city to consider this question a little bit more deeply. But talk about how you started with one issue and then maybe started to zoom out.
Sure, sure. I mean, and also a little bit of background on me. I grew up in Massachusetts, and one of my favorite things was when my parents would drop me and my cousin off when we were teenagers at the T, that's the train in Boston, and we would get to go into the city to visit my sister who was in college, and the unsupervised freedom of being in a city, of people watching, of adventuring and walking has always been something I've loved and really what drew me a lot to this work. And I moved to LA late 90s, almost 30 years ago. And at one point in my career, I was working with this guy who used a wheelchair, and we would meet up and go for walking and rolling meetings. And this was like 2010, right when the hearings were starting for the class action lawsuit. And he was actually going to some of them. But during our walks, we would often just go in the street because we couldn't count on whether the sidewalk was continuous or would have an access ramp. And then that, and then my work with LA Walks, my work with you, Alyssa, and just being someone who loves to walk around LA, you just see problems everywhere in the public right of way on the sidewalks, which got very little attention. And over the years, it's kind of led me to where I am today, that it's not just one problem, it's they're all connected. Um,
So you
yeah.
started investing in place, which I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with, but what's the premise of this nonprofit and what is the goal here now that you've kind of looked at the systemic
Sure,
problems?
sure. I mean, why we started it in 2015 was we could see the writing on the wall for Measure M coming. And we had at that point, through my work with Safe Routes to School, there was a growing community. I saw Dorothy Wong on here. A lot of people actually were on this call. We were doing I don't know if people remember, a Metro Fun Walk Bike campaign. We were really organizing what we had called at the time. And Zach, who's on this call too, was one of the key authors of a transportation finance paper we wrote. We started investing in place because through my previous research and work, whether at SCAG, where I was a transportation planner, or on Safe Routes to School work I did, we knew that less than 1% of the region's transportation dollars were going to sidewalks. But we knew lots of people walked and rolled. And Measure M was coming, and we wanted to build and support a group conversation, fighting, advocating, standing up for investments in sidewalks and bike lanes. And we did it. And it was, so that was really why we started. And then over the years, I've worked on things like complete streets, Vision Zero, bus shelter reform, sidewalk reform, moms in mobility, all sorts of different campaigns, which have led me really to where I am now. It's because like previous work, it sometimes felt like I was putting my finger on the dam. Like first, why can't we fix bus shelters? And it all came back to there just wasn't a system set up in the city of Los Angeles to really plan, manage, maintain. Creating your folder. Oh, nice. Yeah. Francie, mute. Um,
I got it. I got it.
all of these things we all cared about. And so that really led me to reading a lot of powerful work about the value of a capital infrastructure plan, which is a basic governance tool, and cities all over use it.
So that is like the one thing I want to highlight. And again, like I know a lot of people who are here, know about you and know about your work, but you were the first person I learned about the possibility of something like this and why the city doesn't have one. So every other major city, including like every other city in LA County, plans their infrastructure improvements multiple years at a time and with a consolidated kind of agenda with the let's all departments work together, and with priorities like what do we want this infrastructure to do? Do we have climate goals? We don't do that, and but we're supposed to start doing it now, thanks to your advocacy. Talk a little bit about the CIP.
Sure. Um, also, it's like not my idea.
It's not
It's
your idea,
a
but you
basic,
like raise the like level of
yeah,
awareness.
no, but I think that it's a basic governance tool as a really great starting point for managing a city's public assets. And I really attribute a lot of credit to this brilliant woman, Leila Alcaresh, who wrote a 2017 report called The State of the City's Street Infrastructure. She never gets enough credit for the hard work she did in that report, and that informed so much of my thinking. She interviewed all these city staff. She looked at everything. If you haven't read it, it just has grounded the way I approach it. What was a total bummer is that when she did that report for the CAO's office, which was actually commissioned by Miguel Santana when he was CAO, there was very little political coaching that went on when she delivered the findings, and people felt in their feelings. And it was a big, heavy kind of thing she was presenting that at the time, I think people felt was just too much to take on. I mean, there have been conversations for a capital infrastructure program in Los Angeles, motions I found going back to 2013 from Blumenfeld. So, and the last time the city of Los Angeles had a capital infrastructure plan, as far as I can tell, our program, um, was in the 90s. So I think that there's been a lot of base building work done, but I think also I want to acknowledge we live in a political culture that works on, election cycles, and a CIP really requires a broad bench of leadership that's willing to think long term for the entirety of the city. And LA has gotten into a place where we have very few people who are thinking citywide, who are caring about the infrastructure citywide. The divide by 15 culture is quite powerful. And also, even right now, shout out to the city staff who are in the midst of budget chaos for the next 5 or 6 weeks. When you don't have a CIP and you decide things 1 year at a time, it's often really important to stay in the good graces of people in power and do what they want. So doing systemic thinking and management and making tough trade-offs
Right.
publicly is not always something that I feel like over the past while in LA political culture has been able to do.
So magically, as you're trying to dive into this and say, God, what we really need to do is like maybe make some bigger, deeper reforms. Lo and behold, we have this big charter reform process, which opens a window to possibly change the way we do things. And as you're preparing for this, I just thought this was like such an awesome another kind of way to address the problem is to convene this group of leaders who could put together a vision. Like it's not just saying like, we need to change our systems of funding and the way we, have departments work together, but what is the vision of what we want? And the way that you talk about things like not just our sidewalks and like our tree canopy, but like our parks kind of all fitting together as part of this one singular vision for what we want LA to be.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And I have done a lot of work in transportation, but I don't really feel like I'm a transportation person anymore. I'm really interested in governance. And I'm very interested in how we create conversations in governance for the management of sidewalks, streets, and parks, all three together. Because what I really care about is neighborhoods that we want to be in and see our neighbors and linger and take our kids to the park and to me, transportation, in my experience in Los Angeles, has been really heavily focused on the roadbed. And I think all of the other squishy, wonderful parts that make our neighborhoods really awesome have been kind of left behind. And I
Squishy. I
think
love that. The
how we
squishy
got
response.
this to charter reform, I give a lot of credit to the mayor's office for Executive Directive number 9. They were very responsive to the ideas of the need for systemic reform back when they started. And it's a big, heavy lift. But I would say that's one of the many reasons Charter Reform Commission took it seriously.
So through this process, so yeah, we should say that there's two different things. I kind of dropped these two links. So there's Executive Directive 9, and then there's also something else called the Game CIP, which I hoped we had that. Oh, my volume's too low. Sorry. Let me turn that up. Is this a little bit better if I have my volume up? Is
Sounds
that
good to
better?
me.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry. I was worried I got further away from the microphone. Um, so we have Executive Directive 9, which is one, it's going to eventually deliver this CIP. We have the game CIP, which is an interesting kind of offshoot, which is kind of like a test of how a CIP would work. But I thought we'd have it in hand by now. We don't have it quite yet. But what are the bigger, I'll drop that link in there too, but what is the bigger changes that we should see coming through this, the reform that it's such a big process to even begin, but you gave a presentation to the charter reform committee, and then
Yep.
what are some of the key things that we should see looking through that?
So I am super excited about charter reform. Like, I think it's an incredible moment to have unanimous support from the Charter Reform Commission to create a 5-year CIP. So that recommendation has moved forward. Also, a recommendation that enjoys unanimous support from the Commission is rescoping and really creating a director of public works, full stop. We currently have that position in the charter, but it's just an administrative, it's not an executive leadership position, but the charter reform that city council will review in the next couple of weeks, that has been recommended. So we have a director of public works who's in charge of the CIP. I want to take a beat though, and just when I care about streets, sidewalks, and parks, and I want to see a CIP for those three things ASAP. We don't even need to wait for charter reform. We can get to work on it right now. But just stepping back, Public Works, the Department of Public Works, made up of 5 bureaus and then other initiatives. They do so much of the design and the maintenance of our parks, of other things. It's all interrelated. While we have a rec and parks department, their relationship between Public Works is very important. And so having a strong director of public works who's an executive who can wrangle the CIP, who can manage the departments and the bureaus to make things all go in one direction is incredibly important. I'm also really excited about the doubling of the investment for parks that the Charter Reform Commission is putting forward. And then there's some other things I'm kind of tracking about mayoral powers and things like that that are really interesting. But the big ones for me, of course, are a CIP that is not just that has real financial guardrails. Because what I think of a CIP is really more of a budget. It's multi-year budgeting so that city staff can do work planning, so we can ramp up, so we can do all the things that we want to do. And I often think about Vision Zero and why that struggled so bad. And a lot of that is due to the lack of multi-year planning, the lack of multi-year budgeting, having DOT have authority to be the boss of everyone for lack of a more graceful way. But like, I was listening to a podcast Mike Bonin just did the other day with the Charter Commission Chair Raymond Meza. Really good. Highly recommend that podcast. And they were talking about how back in the day, LA really started to be created, was created to be decentralized to get away from corruption. But now we're in a place where we don't know who's in charge of anything. And by default, often no one is. And the Charter Commission has really worked hard to figure out who is in charge and who can be held accountable when things go wrong. And I think that's a really important step forward.
And it's interesting too. Is my volume okay? I'm just
Yeah,
want to make sure. Okay, yeah. I'm just some people are still. I'm just want to check and make sure it's okay.
or at least it is for me. Yeah.
Okay. So some and some things too that came up, I think, during this process, and this is something that, it gets Mike gets into in this conversation as well, is like when you're threatening to take away people's power. This is part of like expanding the council as well, right? Like we want the recommendation to be approved where we're going from 15 council members to, well, we wish it was like 31, but whatever. We'll take what we can get. And then you're talking about things like changing the way the Public Works Board works. And then, but council members also, and department heads, and even the mayor or whoever, that you start to see like, oh, you're going to take away this away from me, or take my staff away from me, and that starts to get really personal and sensitive. Like, how do we get people in to buy into this idea of reform, that things have to change, when it's always going to be this very personal thing with the people who are in charge, worrying about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with this group right here. It starts with civic power. It starts with Angelinos who are speaking up for the good of the city, not just, their own specific interests. I don't know. It's a really hard question, but I think it's about supporting a community and a culture of loving the city as a whole and really what's best for the management of the city. And I think it's also pretty hard to deny that keeping things as they are isn't really a great idea and should not even be an option. I sometimes think where the city is in a state of managed decline by its current lack of a system. And I think what led us to even charter reform is, oh, it takes a year to get your street light fixed, right? If you want an access ramp, you can wait 10 years. Basic city services are currently unable to be delivered. And I think we have to keep that as our North Star, is how do we, and I don't even think about it as fix the city, but take care of the city and then maintain it. And I also don't see a tremendous loss of power. I actually see gained power in knowing what's coming and what we can champion. And CIPs often, like in Long Beach, like if a council member wants to be able to show their constituents what's happening in their neighborhood, the CIP will allow that. Right now, good luck trying to figure that out. So I think actually knowledge is power, and we will gain more power than actually lose it.
And you said something also that's really important. The key part, I think, for when you look at your the charter reform recommendations, or what you're trying to ask for with the CIP, it's about maintenance more than anything, really. It's about this idea of care. And yes, we can like cobble together the money to like build a bridge or fix the street lights once or something, but
Right?
it needs to be like built into, our ethos as a city. Can you talk a little bit about this idea of care, which I think is so beautiful?
Yeah, I mean, I think care is so beautiful too. And one of the words that came up during our work with our leadership, our public space leadership council, and some salons we had, um, was this word stewardship, that we want to live in a city that is the steward for our public assets. And I think a 5-year CIP, one of the reasons I'm really attracted to it is it requires an asset inventory. What do we own? What condition is it in? What does it cost to bring it up to state of good repair? Not to mention the things we might want to build. And I think if we got to work right now on a 5-year CIP and our asset inventory, which people in the city are doing right now, and we came up short and we knew how much money we needed for our parks and our streets and our sidewalks, I would be super interested in a revenue ballot measure for 2028 to get really going for a great city. One of my bigger concerns with the CIP is that people will slow walk it. And I have such a
It's
huge
already kind
sense.
of being slow walked.
It's hard. And so I just hope we can really see leadership and civic power saying, let's get to work ASAP on street sidewalks and parks. One of the CAO's reports I read a few weeks ago about a 2-year budget, they had us starting a CIP like 2029, 2030, 2031. And It is so well documented thanks to the amazing parks needs assessment, thanks to lots of work many people on this call have done on parks, streets, and sidewalks, how broken the management of our public spaces. I don't know why we wouldn't get started ASAP. And I'm really looking for our mayoral conversations and all the elected conversations to see who's saying that and who has a sense of urgency. We can do a citywide CIP for everything under the sun and take our time, but the urgency on our public infrastructure is just tremendous. And it is so well documented where the problems are. So I don't know why we would delay getting to work right away. Also, potentially setting ourselves up to be more competitive for funding, to leverage more funding for public-private partnerships, for partnerships with bids, all of the above, like inviting everyone in to solve these problems instead of like Angelinos care like a lot. And we see that with all those people who are picking up trash all the time. And I'm really grateful for the hard work they're doing. How do we take that leadership from Angelinos and transition that into the city management of all that?
Yeah, because it's really, I mean, I think like we talk a lot about the word like plan, and it's even like a very specific way to look at the phrasing of CIP because some people call it a plan, but you were very like intentional in saying it's a program because we want to talk about it as like a funded actual thing that's happening because we have so many plans, and we even had this past week the mayor put out her climate action plan, for example, but like none of these things really matter, or Vision Zero is another good example that you're talking about, unless it has money and
A project list.
a project. I mean, the sustained kind of financial backing and priorities and all these things that we've been talking about. And the parks thing is really interesting too. As I've written, and we had Jessica Henson here talking about the needs assessment, which I think was like again, like what we need to do first is look at the assets and say like what's actually going on here. But then that's going to be one separate ballot measure now. The way that it's set up, that's going to go to voters, and people are going to have to say like, yes, I want more money for parks, but then there's all these other, and then streetlights, your streetlight thing. Oh, I meant to hold it up, but you got this, you might have gotten the streetlight assessment mailer where we're gonna have to pay more for streetlights. That has its own plan for how we're going to fund streetlights, but that's a whole different thing. But what you're saying might be more effective and kind of is more in line with what would fall together with all the reform that's being made at the charter level would be this bigger ask for a more comprehensive funding mechanism.
Yeah, it's about damn time. Like many other cities, Long Beach, Burbank, people have dedicated infrastructure dollars. And while the city of Los Angeles gets a tremendous amount of money from special funds and then, of course, some of the general fund allocations, we need to really figure out what it would take to put the city in good repair and close that financial gap. The reason I hesitated is one of the recommendations in our report was our Public Space Leadership Council felt hell no. No more money for City of LA unless we see systemic reform. People weren't even convinced. We had a lot of discussions if money was even the problem. And I think when I talk about that with city staff, they're like, are you crazy? Of course, money is the problem. But there's a lot of tension because we really don't know where a lot of our money has gone. Looking historically back at City of LA's public works, transportation, stuff is incredibly hard to do. But the parks ballot measure, I don't think is going forward this year. And I've been talking to park advocates of like, let's work together. Like, let's have a culture of championing our public spaces for everyone to have access and inclusion and comfort and nature and trees and water fountains and public bathrooms and all the things that
Mm.
also help leverage our massive investments we see coming out of Metro. I've been thinking a lot about how everybody talks about how Metro is really good at project delivery, mega projects, right? Our subways, our light rails. But are we really seeing the kind of multiplying effects from those great investments when we can't figure out how to do first and last mile at all? When we're narrowing sidewalks by light rail stations in the valley and ripping out trees, like
Or planting palm trees.
yeah, like how do we get LA to meet the moment with the massive regional investments Metro has making? That to me sounds so exciting.
And I
Yeah.
love how that comes full circle to what you're talking about. Like, I don't even think people understand that that's what happens with our Measure M money. Like, people like are like, oh, the D line's opening. Like, that's really exciting. But all that money came back to us to look at around those stations and how we're supposed to treat the built environment, like you said, to make it easier to use these they shouldn't be like single story stations on a big plaza. They should be housing, but you know what I mean. But the way that we treat the infrastructure around these big investments that we're making, this makes a big difference in how we use them. And so if we had, like you're talking about, this vision for what these places were supposed to look like, and they could be replicated around the city, I mean that we I like the way that you always point out, like we already do have quite a bit of money coming in for this stuff, and sometimes it gets sent back. We
Yes.
lost like these active transportation grants because the city could not build like
Yep.
bike and pedestrian infrastructure in a timely manner, and sometimes we have to give it back to the state
Yeah.
because we can't do our project delivery.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole rich conversation too. But like, we fought really hard, many people on this call in 2015 to see that cities had to match when a big rail project goes in, they have to match by 3%. But if that 3% cost was completely invested in first and last mile, like you could either write a check or you could maximize your 3% to increase the access to the transit around there. Guess what LA is doing right now? Writing a check. Instead of a robust program to improve first and last mile and really leveraging that opportunity to connect. But in people's defense, in city staff and in the leadership, the system's not there. And we don't have advanced planning. We don't have a chief executive from Public Works who stands up for the city, who knows the vision for the public right away. Like there's these just massive gaps where no one is really the champion for the city-wide infrastructure. And so big opportunities like that. I mean, also like city staff is the lowest it's been since like 2008. Everybody's like freaked out, overworked, on a constant hamster wheel of making a budget. Where is the space in the city to think long term for everyone? And I think that's what we're trying to create with a multi-year charter and a chief of public works.
So you talked about two things related to the budget that I just want to reiterate, since we are in budget drop week. This was, if you didn't watch yesterday, I can share the links of, there it takes a few days for everyone to read through all the documents and actually see what's in there, but there's like list of priorities, all these different things. And one thing they actually did talk about at the press conference yesterday was this idea that we could drop a budget at least 2 years at a time without any reform. Like, so that could have been something that could have been done. We could have done a 2 year budget. But talk a little bit about the major changes. Um, I guess we're going to be stuck in this still for a bit. I don't know how fast it gets implemented if we vote it through. But like, talk about some of the major changes we would see if we would have the 1 year budget of yesterday compared to the 5 year budget of tomorrow, the future.
Yeah. Also, like, we don't need to wait for charter reform to do a CIP. Like, city council can do that. The reason we're
Yes.
codifying it in the charter because they haven't. Full
Yes.
stop. Like, I have at least 10 motions for CIP, and they always dead end. And so that's why we want it part of the city's constitution.
Oh, and also to be clear, it's an executive directive right now, which means if there's another mayor, it could be
Yep.
undone. Yeah, okay.
And
So
it's really struggled as an executive directive towards implementation. Like, how do we have widespread ownership for this structural change? So what would change? Well, we'd all have a lot more sharing of information and shared power. And we could create a function where city staff don't have to quote kiss the ring, stay in good graces, worry every year if their money is going to get swept, be able to do multi-year work planning for the public to know what's going in their community, but also, like, what I think is really important is understand what it would take to bring an asset, an element of our public right of way into state of good repair and have those trade-off discussions in public. Right now, like one of the things that often led me to this is I was sitting in budget hearings, I'd be like, oh, is like 30 million a year for sidewalks enough? What's the total cost for sidewalk repair? No idea. Like, and so a CIP and asset management, right? Knowing what the condition of things are in, how much it costs to bring them into good shape, allows a conversation about what we're prioritizing and what we're not. And right now, that is so murky, I think, at least to me, on who's making those trade-offs and why. It also allows the departments and the bureaus doing the work to set the stage and the vision, and then the budget people to come. Currently, it's the reverse. Currently, our budgets drive the programs, the
yes.
departments, the staffing, and I'm really hungry for an ability to see what would it take to do X, Y, and Z, and then more of a public discussion about what we're prioritizing and why
Mm.
for 5 years. Also, like what I think is really important about a CIP is how many years are encumbered, locked in. Typically, what cities do is they'll at least program 1 to 2 to 3 years worth of dollars. So you can count on those. And every other year, they'll update the CIP. So it's rolling, it's iterative. But there is a level of guarantee that your project won't get slashed next year. And I think that's really incredibly important.
So, like to give an example of like a major project and how it gets funded in these multi-year things, we have things like the Griffith Park pool is getting redone, and the relighting of the Sixth Street Bridge because they have to harden it to fix all the copper wiring and then make sure that it can't get darkened again. So oh, the convention center is another good example too, right? So we have all these different mechanisms for funding and for building and planning all these things, but they should all be going under the same umbrella. And you would go plan for 5 years and you would be able to say, you know what, this isn't actually like our top priority. This is actually like a really important thing. This we're have a lawsuit that we're facing, so you'd be able to do that instead of what happens is, like you said, either council members are fighting to get their pet project, wedged in there, or
Mhm.
there's a big vote that has to happen, like the convention center, which, like not the biggest fan of the way that they're going about this, right? Which is costing us as much money as we as much money as we're like paying out, I think, in liabilities for
It's a lot.
sidewalks, right? Like, so it's like, oh, maybe the money should be going to that, and then you could find another way to pay for things. Anyway, so I love your idea of like assessments and making sure that we have a clear vision for what we need to do. This is what you texted me very excitedly right before we got on to this call, which is this idea that we're finally going to do this inventory of our sidewalks, bringing it back to the sidewalks again. Just talk about why this is so exciting. This has been like a decade of work in your advocacy.
Yeah, no, sidewalks to me are the through line in a lot of this broken system. I think I just think about all of the assets that sit on our sidewalk and how they're kind of the backbone for so many things. But yeah, there are like 9,000 to maybe 11,000 miles of sidewalks.
Oh, back. Oh,
Nobody,
just picked it up. Oh, I said,
nobody really knows.
It's excited.
Because there is no inventory, right? And so in my head, I'm always like, wait, how can you have an infrastructure that is from here to Singapore and you don't even know what the condition? How on earth do you start to put together a financial package to make a meaningful dent? I mean, the city by the city has, first off, the city has no sidewalk program. Like, I really think it's important to realize there is no sidewalk program in the city of Los Angeles. There's a class action lawsuit, and if you're a member of the class, you go to the top of a long wait list for access ramps and for improvements for crosswalks, for curb ramps, for sidewalks, for people using mobility devices, people with disabilities, which is really important. But that's all the city is doing, the bare minimum. And so they are mandated by the court settlement to spend, I think it's like 35 to 40 million a year. Galpern did a really cool sidewalk audit on the class action lawsuit and the state that at that pace we're hitting less than 1% of all the sidewalk parcels. So it's like a real mismatch on what the need is because we don't have an inventory. In this year's budget, the one that dropped yesterday, I'm super, super, super excited that there's a 10 million line item for creating an inventory of these 9,000 miles of sidewalks using LiDAR, using all these smart people, building off the pilot. This is a pilot that they've been working on, so it's expanding that. But I think when we start to understand what is out on the city streets and parks, that allows an educated decision and to know the pace of which we're going will improve things. So I'm super excited about that.
And that's like a good example of, yeah, you don't know until you don't know how to fix it until you know the state of it. But also what we're doing now and what you also saw in this budget and something was just also approved in council today is this acceleration to fix sidewalks around the Olympic and Paralympic venues, by the way, around these venues where I'm not sure the top priority of the entire city when it comes to curb ramps or accessibility needs are going to be, a couple blocks in Westwood when you compare it to like a very heavily traveled intersection in downtown. And so, and again, we're having these lists being made for us and kind of being maybe council members looked at how close some of their sidewalks were, and they're like, oh, we need to get in on this for, and we're going to throw this list in here. And we don't know how these priorities are being set or and in general, but now we know that they're going to be accelerated for this one particular thing. And maybe that does help avert more lawsuits as you have like millions of people coming to get around the city and go to some of these places. But it just once again seems like we're kind of throwing it at the wall and being like, okay, well, let's try to get what we can get done, but without much forethought about like, what comes next.
Yeah, I mean, I think our neighborhoods, so there's like 200 neighborhoods or something in LA and city of LA. They're so different, right? In terms of like, I'm so excited. I live in a neighborhood that has street trees on the sidewalk and I have shade. But there are neighborhoods, particularly ones that have been historically redlined, that the infrastructure investment is terrible and almost non-existent. And you see that either from trees to crosswalks to street lights to whatever trash pickup. And if we want to be leaders in equity and caring about all of the neighborhoods, not just the ones we live in or whatever, but a city that works for us all, um, we need an inventory to understand how to prioritize it. For if we were using 311 just to prioritize repair, which is currently what they do for streetlights, like that is not equitable. That never gives us a shot at understanding the need and prioritizing and heavily weighting areas that need to come up more. A lot of our investments that happen in our public right of way right now are private development. So sometimes our places that are really nice and we see a lot of development going and continue to go up, get their sidewalks fixed, to get a street tree, and the ones that are seeing disinvestment continue. So we need to really level out with an intention that every neighborhood should have street trees and birds singing and like a pleasant place to live and be with one's friends and family. And I think right now the stark differences between Brentwood and Watts in the public infrastructure in what the city manages is something we could fix. I don't know, listen, you might have talked, there's this really amazing study somebody did about birds and
Oh yeah,
redlining.
that was so good. But did you have it?
That
You had it linked in one of your stories, I feel like, or you had it
I
like,
found this really cool slide. I have to find it. But like the redlining that happened in the 1930s in Los Angeles, really where people of color could live in South LA or in certain neighborhoods and where the insurance was for more the wealthy, those investments by developers, by the city to make trees, to make nice neighborhoods, to make narrow streets, all that still exists today because we haven't undone them. And one of the ways these researchers could really see it is where you can see songbirds and different types of bird variety that require trees and different brush. Uh, and so those all live Northeast LA, the different parts of West Side and things like that. But South LA and East LA and some of those parts that have been redlined, the only bird life is really like pigeons or house finches, birds that survive on a lot of concrete, that can survive. And so I think like I am become very interested in how neighborhoods not only have smooth sidewalks and curb ramps, but street trees and nature and access to parks, or our sidewalks are like mini parks. Um, and so that's my long-winded way of saying is a CIP asset inventories are only is the biggest way to have a meaningful equitable investment program in the city of LA.
yeah, I mean, just getting back from Paris and the way that they have biodiversity as part of all
Mhm.
of their goals in, even something like, they have shelters that I wrote about that have like greenery as silly as that seems, you think it seems a little bit frivolous, but then you start to look at it and you're like, actually, okay, yeah, like it's bringing it out, it's connecting kind of like one park to another through the streetscape, or there's like bees and butterflies like literally waiting for the bus with you, and you start to see how that can like really improve your experience. Yes, moving around this like, asphalt concrete city. But the goals of like increasing the number of fish in the Seine and increasing the number of songbirds, like those are real things. And those have like metrics tied to them that you can achieve. You can look at it and say, yeah, we need this much less pavement to be in this area, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think just like, well, sorry to cut you up, like,
No.
uh, how do we create a culture where the government exists to improve our quality of life, right? So we all pay taxes and pool our money together with the thought of we care about each other, we share these spaces, we want it to work. And so to me, the public spaces is such a clear place for public dollars, for government to be leaders and elevating our quality of life, our ability to see our friends and family, our ability to watch our neighbors, say hi to our neighbors, not say hi to our neighbors, all of the things. Because like, so we have this cool, I have this sweatshirt that I love that says sidewalks where life happens. And I don't know if my colleague Kim's on this, but I think sidewalks, public spaces are incredibly important in social cohesion and knowing one's neighbors, being cool with oneself, all the people watching values. And I just want to support governance reform that allows cities to create those places. I know, like, when people go on vacation, isn't that where we all want to go? Like, except for if it's at the beach. But like, I think like being with other human beings for free on my own terms is something I really cherish and want to be supportive of in LA.
I love that. It's so great. Let's open it up for questions, and you could either put them in the chat or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask and turn on your screen if you'd like. And I can also get the conversation. I mean, I was definitely, it was really resonating when you talk about the way that 311 requests, which we have, it's getting on the year anniversary of our new 311 app, which is it's they're still fixing a lot of stuff. It doesn't work as well as it used to, but they said they're fixing things. But I do find it interesting that like everything is complaint based, right? And the thing about the streetlights, which is, it has almost like people cared a lot about sidewalks, and then all of a sudden people cared a lot about streetlights, and now it's become this like major campaign issue that everybody's talking about. And when you look more into the data, it's like the wealthiest neighborhoods have the highest number of complaints for the streetlights. And then you start to be like, oh, I see why elected officials finally started to pay attention because they were deluged by all
Mhm.
these calls from people who felt that their neighborhoods felt unsafe all of a sudden if the lights aren't on. It's a little bit of a different thing than like a sidewalk crumbling in front of your house or in front of your apartment or in front of your bus stop. It's a perception that creates a different feeling in your neighborhood. And I think now all of a sudden you have to have this really uncomfortable conversation where you're telling people they have to pay more for something. And in some cases, you can put solar in, but that's not what the historic streetlight neighborhoods are going to want these giant solar panels on top of their lights. So we do have to pay for it, and we're going to have to pay more for it. And they have to come up with a plan and say, this is how we're going to do it, you know?
But I would just say what I'm grumpy about a little bit with streetlights is how long this underfunded department was allowed to exist. And
Yes.
where was the leadership to right size the financing?
So
That
what the 90s is what we're the answer is that they have not raised this assessment fee that you're going to have to raise since the 90s. How does that happen?
lack of leadership, right? Or lack of someone who feels like they're the champion or the executive in charge of it. And I think like that's where I think the charter reform is really trying to get at like who's responsible for this and who do we hold accountable? And why we lived in a budget cycle where there was no one championing like, hey man, this is a department that needs like 115 million, but every year we're giving them 39 million. Shit's really gonna, show up bad in a minute. And we see that also with sidewalks. We haven't invested in sidewalks since the 70s. And every time I hear a city council be like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive to fix sidewalks. The 50 years of deferred maintenance on, and how old is the Griffith Park pool? Like you just can't get away with deferred maintenance for 50 years and then be surprised that this is a big project.
Yeah, it's 100 years old. Yeah. Question, can you share your thoughts on the existing infrastructure around surrounding the new D-line stops? Do you think Miracle Mile is prepared for this influx of people?
You should answer that one.
I mean, I walked from the Fairfax station to the La Brea station the other day, counting the new palm trees. I'll continue to be walking up and down the street counting the new palm trees. Um, there's no people out at all right now. Like there's not there's empty businesses and like there's could be so much amazing outdoor dining and there's very wide, nice sidewalks that are waiting for, a pedestrian infusion of people. And there should be a lot more housing being built along Wilshire, and there should be housing being built on top of the metro stations. Like it's a crime to see these like tiny little huts just sitting there on all this property that we own. This is just my own opinions. But yeah, I think this is going to be one of the most game-changing moments for the city. And not just because, yeah, you're getting like, to go to LACMA and Beverly Hills eventually and all these like, cultural zones, which is really cool. But you're connecting some of the densest neighborhoods in the entire city with this really fast, really efficient, awesome way to get around. And like that should just push tons of people onto the street and make it the most vibrant, like exciting part of the city.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I kicked it to you is because I know you've been doing so much reporting on this, and I'm not in this deep. I am so excited for the D line and for all of these public spaces that we can now access. But I think if you're grumpy about the way the city is managing the public right of way around the train station, yeah, I think we all are. And I think that that's a really good case in point when we have no champion for the public right of way, this is what happens. Like to give DOT, like I really think it's important for people to understand how maybe 20 departments touch our public right away, and I don't think a single one of them thinks they're in charge. Like they all have their little fiefdoms, right? Like so DOT is roadbed, curb painting, like I can't tell you how many times I would see a Vision Zero project that I really liked and thought was cool with no access ramp. No, the sidewalk is completely broken. And the high rates of people walking or in wheelchairs that are getting hit by cars to do a Vision Zero project and ignore the sidewalk was like, I get so frustrated. But in DOT's defense, they have zero purview over the sidewalk. So I think like all these different players, all doing their own thing, all doing their own budgets, some not really getting along with each other, and no one in charge has led us to where we are today.
I will say that I like that Katie Yaroslavsky got there to be coffee kiosks in all the new stations on the D-Line station. So at least we'll have a little bit of
Ooh, that sounds
a little
fun.
bit of public space, like where life happens. Some Jessica Meaney, approved infrastructure that'll be part of the stations. They're not all horrible. Another question. So someone's saying walking down to Little Ethiopia could be more pleasant. Yeah, I mean, like, what's the first mile, last mile plan to get people to those stations?
Mm.
You see limited improvements and not really this like welcoming, gateways to these new places. Anyone else have a question?
I also think that's like such a good, like with Little Ethiopia, it's such a good opportunity to continue to like insert cultural parts of our public right of way, public art, all of the things that make us feel part of a community and honor who lives there too.
Someone's saying that they thought there would be farmers markets at the Wilshire, La Brea, and Fairfax stations, but they may not have activations the rest of the time. I mean, yeah, we can't just have a farmers market like one day a week. Like that's great, but like that doesn't solve the problem. Any insights into what the excitement around LACMA galleries mean? And someone says no dockless scooters. So what does that mean? Does that mean we're advocating against dockless scooters? I will have to say that just being in Paris, like, I could not imagine they voted to not have scooters as part of their share and only have bikes, which was really interesting. And the perception also, I wouldn't want to be on like a bird scooter going over somewhere like the cobblestone streets. Like it seemed very scary. But instead, they have like five bike share programs, and it's like you have both the municipal one and then all these other ones. So it's really exciting to see, if I want to see more bike share and scooter share, whatever. I mean, but like a little bit better maintenance of the infrastructure to make sure that we can get around. I'm seeing more and more articles about the worst intersections in LA. Why can't anything be done about them? There was like a like
Americana.
America, yeah, Americana and brand memes. Yeah, well, that's a good one. I think to your point of like how many departments have, jurisdiction or try to claim jurisdiction. One of the worst ones is getting turned into BRT, the NoHo Lancashire one. They're going to run a BRT through the middle of it, that's exciting, I guess. But what do we do about bad intersections?
Get to work. I don't know. Figure it out. I mean, I think the one thing where we are today is we have we have great valuable data. We know what's it like 6% of the streets are where our worst collisions are and things like that. Americana brand memes let us know where people feel the worst. Like we know where a lot of the problems are. We know where the inequities are. We know it's in the valley. We know it's in East LA, Boyle Heights. We know it's in South LA. Like we know who's seeing disinvestment. We know where the dangerous places are. Like so let's make a plan and let's make a budget. And if we need money, let's figure out a strategy to get there. I think a lot about like my experience on Measure M and where we saw 3 years of work of what are the priorities, what are
Mm.
the year they're going to get built, how do we get there? And I think Metro is really good at project delivery. Unfortunately, like mega stuff. So we need LA to get really good at project delivery for the small, squishy stuff that we've overlooked for decades.
I love talking about it squishy. What could the CIP asset inventory counting and assessment feel like or look like? It's a cool opportunity to crowdsource from community members, like sh snow shoveling, the open call from NYC, but make it street maintenance. So this, I think they do have a plan for how to do some of it, right?
Yeah, I think some of it's already at work. I don't know all the ins and outs, and I think it is a great opportunity. The only thing I caution against, or let's go positive. Whatever we're crowdsourcing, I want to see a budget tied to it. I
Mm.
don't, there, a couple years ago, this is before COVID, I was sitting in a public works committee and one of the council members was like, there's 50,000 requests sitting in 311 for sidewalks. What do you say we just swipe it out? Like we have crowdsourcing material, but we have not made the leap on how to put that into implementation. And I think like that, and Alyssa mentioned this earlier, like I don't really look at plans anymore that don't have a budget and a line item and a project list and a prioritization. And I think there are so many good plans in LA for our public right of way, for our parks, that we don't need to do a whole lot of public planning processes. We just need to get to work. I also think we don't need to do a ton of community outreach to know that people want their streetlights to work and there to be public bathrooms when they're using transit or walking around. Like, let's get the basics done, and then we can worry about like how like other thing. But I think there's general consensus of what Angelinos want in their neighborhoods.
Thoughts about, oh, great. This is a great question. Thoughts about balancing the costs of catching up on deferred maintenance, or number two, increasing existing maintenance budgets to not let things slide more, or three, new projects. So, how do we tackle all those, which are all problems for us?
Well, first off, shout out to Francie for the best question and the work that Lonnie does. If you guys don't know, like one of the things I really love about Lonnie is, of course, fixing the sidewalks, but a lot of the bids that you guys manage. So bids are business improvement districts, which are some of our best caretakers for our public spaces in Los Angeles right now. Uh, I don't know, Francie, I want it all, but I guess I would go with one and two first. But I don't think that's that politically popular. But I think if we even brought all of our assets up to state of good repair would be a tremendous win without even doing another capital. But I think there has to be a balance and a long-term vision for getting there that has real money behind it. I also like want to take a beat and say like, why don't we just do our like what do they call it? The WPA, the works something.
Yes.
Let's put everybody to work and have local hire jobs. And like I also think like a CIP, having a multi-year infrastructure plan of what we're going to actually put money on and do, to me would allow trades and the, to create apprenticeships to queue up having local hire, having a queue, like a pool of people who can do this infrastructure work that live in Los Angeles and can get good jobs. To me, investing in the city's infrastructure has pays dividends in mental health, climate resilience, local hire, like economy, good for businesses. Like it's so multi touches so many things. It's just such an exciting opportunity to envision actually getting this done.
Yeah, this was something that just came through. I was alluding to the, there's going to be sidewalk repairs that are going to be prioritized around some of the venues. And Monica and Rodriguez today was talking about, they just advanced it in council. But it's a youth sidewalk repair program, which I didn't even know that we had. So you get like these apprenticeships, you're paid, good wages, but like it's for like to get people like I think starting at age 18, like into the workforce and be like, okay, like we're going to teach you how to do this really important thing. So it's kind of it's through LA Conservation Corps. Yes, thanks, Francie. But this is why it's so that's exactly what you're talking about, kind of is this idea that we are going to be training people to be part of our municipal, you know, workforce and get these really great jobs and perpetuate this, care of our communities. I really love that. And if they could plant, if the WPA could, you know, plant a bunch of 40,000 palm trees in the 30s,
Oh,
then
come
who knows
on.
what we can do? We can plant oak trees this time. Laura, you have another question? Do you want to unmute?
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Jessica. Hi.
Hi, Laura.
I'm wondering how the budget that's just come out, how the talk around the CIP right now is considering or folding in these conversations around HLA, if at all. How are these things overlapping right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you'd say. Listen, they're completely related. I mean, one of the reasons HLA is stalled out is because there is no one in charge. There is no project list. There is no consensus on the sequencing of thing. BSS might want to do one street. DOT might have a very developed plan in another street. Also, what's really screwing up HLA implementation is the fact that the city was ignoring federal law and Willits, the class action lawsuit for installing access ramp for maybe 10 years. So now when we want to repave and trigger the mobility plan, like HLA, the cost because of we were in violation and have such a tremendous backlog on access ramps, on curb ramps, it really increases the cost of the project. Now everyone's freaking out. It's like, so to me, it's like the most powerful example of how HLA really good policy, good intentions, good values, voters overwhelmingly support it. The city is not set up to deliver that. And that's what I think we really want to fix. I think the success, we will see HLA really get humming if we can get all the departments on the same page, the sequencing of projects, and somebody in charge
Yeah.
to get everyone to work together.
Do you see them actually doing that though? Like, I'm just wondering if in the conversations now, like the budget that was just put out, I haven't looked at it yet, but is there something that has fundamentally been shifted in order to try to put HLA into works? I mean, I guess one of them then is the inventory, like that would be related in my mind, but
I see it happening much more in charter leadership than budget. And now that's also because of 1 year budget, everyone just freaks out and tries to get through the next 6 weeks understandably, right? But I think where I see the systemic conversations happening is actually in charter to address these very things. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing to look at is, last year compared to this year, right? So last year it was a very dire situation. It's slightly less dire now. Um, but that there is like the fact that the mayor is saying these things out loud, like we are going to be doing more access ramps, we are going to be doing more pothole fix, whatever these particular things. But like there was still some like large asphalt repair language, like types of these things where you're like, oh, are we talking about like doing entire corridors the way that we're supposed to be doing them? And then like, what does that really entail? Are we just still making the most basic upgrades, or are we going to make these like amazing streets for people to use and this first last mile type of solution? Like, are we really going to devote these resources and our workforce and, whatever we can scrape together from grants or whatever to really try to make these big improvements to create these beautiful spaces that Jessica's talking about, that this vision? Are we just going to be, filling the holes and patching it together as best we can? So I think that's the vision still has to come from somewhere.
And I just think it's bonkers to have 2/3 of LA voters say they want a systemic change and the city fight it and not be able to implement
Yeah.
it.
Well, that's
There's a lot of reasons why they struggled in the beginning to implement HLA, which I have sympathy for and understanding. But I think at this point, if we don't have leadership figuring out what the voters want, like that is, and also I'm really heartbroken and upset that I really struggle with the fact that there was nobody in charge or held accountable for the fact that they were repaving without putting in access ramps for years and years and years, which is a part of the class action lawsuit. The city signed a legal document saying how to do it. They signed a legal document saying we will be in compliance with federal law that requires when you repave, we'll put in access ramps. That to me is one of the key reasons I really want a chief of public works. That who the heck like didn't notice, didn't care, was a culture of we just got to keep dividing by 13 and doing repaving so people stay happy. Like, where did
15.
we like decide? Or, yeah, what I don't even know. But like that to me, I just can't wrap my head around of how did a violation of the class action lawsuit and federal policy allowed to go on for years and years and years, and like who's in charge?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great way to end the conversation and remind everyone that not only is it an election year, but there's also a lot of opportunities for advocacy as we go through this budget cycle and the charter reform information. I'm going to drop just one link that's super helpful if you want to go to a working group through LA Forward that is on top of all these conversations. They check in with Jessica and see like, what they need to be advocating for and all these other groups that are kind of moving towards this bigger plan. So go to the CIP working group for LA Forward and you'll get the latest on everything that's going on and how you can push all of that forward as well. Anything to add before we leave? Thank you so much for all your hard work. Always. See, I told you it would be inspirational and optimistic at the end,
Well,
even
I
though
mean,
we.
I just also want to give a shout out to you and to everyone on this Zoom. All these names, all these people I know have been at this. Like we're in it together. Like I think this is we're on the precipice of something I think a lot of us have been working for a long time. So let's go. I'm excited.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. And tomorrow, if you're just watching this, not a recording later, Data and Donuts in the Arts District at Lacey, 8 a.m. We'll be talking to, I think some of them were on this call. We're talking about universal basic mobility and all the great stuff that DOT is doing, which I think, yeah, we want to help them. We want to help all these great agencies achieve their best lives. And this is how we do it. All right. Thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
All right, thanks, Alyssa.